This video will be a review of the 2018 Giant Trance 2, and this will be a follow-up to the ride video that I did where I talked about some features and characteristics of the bike when I was riding, but I wanted to make a second video that just summarized those thoughts, showing the bike up close. I may repeat a few things that I mentioned in the other video, but again, this one's just going to be kind of a summary, the things I like and don't like about the bike after putting in a good day of riding in the mountains. I'll start the review by looking at some of the components on the bike, starting with the drivetrain. With the SLX drivetrain, I actually did drop a chain, literally the first 45 seconds of my first downhill ride on the bike after putting in a pretty good amount of climbing. I dropped it, I put it back on, it did not happen again, so maybe it was a fluke. I don't think I've ever dropped a chain on my carbon trance with XT component, so again, hopefully it was just a fluke. Shifting on the bike is actually really precise, really clean. I shifted pretty hard under load with no issues at all, so no complaints with the SLX shifting. I mean, like I said in the opening video, it is a little bit more muted, the lever's a little bit soft, but other than that, it shifts to me just as well as Shimano XT. The dropper seat post on the bike is very, very smooth. Like I mentioned when I was riding, it does return kind of slow, so I'm going to hit the lever and I'm going to push it all the way down as far as it'll go. That's how fast it comes up. Now, some people like that. I actually prefer one that returns a little bit quicker. When you're bombing down a hill and you've been standing above the saddle a little bit, your legs are burning, you want to sit down sometimes as fast as possible. There were a couple times where I hit the lever and sat down and the seat wasn't all the way up. So my other Trance, it returns really quickly. So that's kind of a matter of preference, but the good thing about the seat post is it's very, very smooth. The lever feels really high quality. I do like the tunability of the XT and SLX lever, so you can turn this knob right here and adjust how far the lever is from the bar, and that's a really nice feature. So someone with shorter fingers like me, you can bring the lever closer and not have to reach out so far. So the Maxxis high rolling resistance, Maxxis high roller 2s. I like the tire for the grip. It's great cornering grip, great braking grip. Even climbing, I cleared a couple sections that I don't clear very often. Just a ton of grip, no slippage. They are pretty high rolling resistance. Compared to my Schwalbe knobby Nicks, I just feel like these drag a little bit more. On the climbs, on the flats, you notice it. On the downhills, you appreciate the grip. So tires are so personal. It's a matter of preference. I actually prefer the knobby Nicks, but I can handle this tire. It's not a big deal. The 2.4 is a really good volume for riding in the mountains. Not too big, not too small. The tubeless aluminum rims did really well. Like I had mentioned when I was riding, aluminum rims compared to carbon have a little bit more give. They feel a little bit softer when you hit bumps. And carbon rims can be built super stiff or they can be built with a little bit of flex, but with aluminum, you do get the ability to just smooth out the ride a little bit. Now, the downside is I felt like I was thrown off my line a couple times with the rims flexing a little bit. Now that's when you're riding pretty aggressively or going over some rock gardens. Take that with a grain of salt because I'm going to do the same trail tomorrow on my carbon Trance with carbon wheels. And just want to mention this is part of my mid versus high price trail bike project. So I won't give a lot of comparisons in this little update to my carbon Trance, but look at my channel for some videos that I'll post doing a more head-to-head comparison. On that same note, the aluminum frame also is pretty supple on the downhills. The aluminum's going to be a little bit heavier than carbon, but to me it's the wheels that make the biggest difference. This aluminum frame, so far so good. I like it. This bike does actually have a carbon rocker link, so there is a little bit of carbon on the bike. I really enjoy the cockpit on this bike. The 280 wide bar and the 50mm stem is a perfect combination. There are a couple times where the handlebars nicked a tree, one coming down a hill, so that was a little scary, but didn't result in a crash, so that was good. Really nice width. Like I said when I was riding again, I would not go bigger than 280. This is max for me. It's East Coast riding. The trees are just too close to the trail, but you do get a lot of control, a lot of power with the wider bar, and the shorter stem, the 50mm stem, is really nice to just flick the bars around when you're going around some tight bends or getting around some tight trees. Just the ability to flick the bars, like I said, and maintain a really nice descending position so you're not pitched too far forward. Geometry for this bike is spot on to me. It does not wander around, so the front end does not wander when you're climbing too bad. You know, back in the day I used to use a talus fork and drop the front end down a little bit, but with these newer 150mm forks, you really don't have that option. I mean, I think talus forks are still made, but most bikes come with just a straight up 150. You know, when you're really going up steep pitches, yeah, the front end, you have to focus a little bit on controlling it, but it's not too bad. So let's talk about the suspension. So really, absolutely no complaints with the fork. It's a 34mm fork with a boost through axle, so it feels really stiff on the descents. Like I said, it didn't wander around when I was climbing. It's got the Fox rhythm damper, and so this knob is infinitely adjustable. There are no clicks, no indentations on the knob, and so you can just rotate it. You know, the more you go clockwise, the more it's going to stiffen up, and it'll eventually get to where it locks out. When I was climbing, I kind of left it right about there. That gave me a pretty good platform for climbing, and then for descending, of course, fully open. Looking at the rear shock, I like the shock. I like the lever. I like the fact that you can just flick it over there for descending, flick it to the middle for climbing, and you can lock it out. I didn't miss the tunability on the open setting that some of the higher end Fox shocks have, where you can actually tune how firm the open setting is. So when I'm climbing, I typically would leave it there. For descending, I just flick it open, and sometimes when I'm climbing, I would put it on the lockout. If it was a dirt road or paved road, definitely put it on the lockout, and even sometimes on single track. Because what I don't like about this shock is how soft it is in the mid setting. This is a very plush shock, but I think it's tuned a little bit too soft for my liking. And so I had mentioned when I was riding that I may look into getting some volume spacers for this to kind of give a little bit more firmness in the mid-stroke of the shock. Now, I will say that the Maestro suspension does do a pretty good job of providing some pedaling platform. What I like about Maestro is if you're doing a descent and then there's a little bit of an uphill and you got to crank, it gives you a decent pedaling platform. But like I said, I'm not going to do a lot of comparisons to my other Trance, but I like the shock tune better on that other Trance. I don't know if it has volume spacers or not, but it's just tuned better, and it gives a better pedaling platform. Now, on the flip side of that, the shock is super plush and super smooth on the descents. Like I said, I typically would just flick it over to the fully open position for descending. And this bike feels like it has more travel than it does because of that. Whereas my other Trance feels more like just a fast trail bike, this feels a little bit more long travel, all mountain. It just feels like it's a burlier, more descending capable bike than some of the other trail bikes that I've ridden. A lot of that has to do with just the cockpit, the plushness of the shock, the super grippiness of the tires. This is a great descending bike. I don't think anybody is going to complain about how well this bike descends. What I had a hard time getting used to on this bike is how heavy it felt on the climbs. So it's only 3 pounds heavier than my other bike, but I'm not very heavy. So 3 pounds for someone who weighs 200 pounds isn't a big deal. If you weigh 143 pounds, it tends to have more of an effect on the way the bike feels on the climbs. I was working pretty hard on the climbs today. Now, I'm going to get out and do the same trail on my Carbon Trance. Like I said, I'll kind of update the comparison between these two. But to me, that's really the only downside of this bike that I can find, is just the fact that it feels heavy and sluggish on the climbs. So that's going to wrap up this summary of the bike after getting some saddle time of riding it in the mountains. Like I had mentioned, keep an eye on my channel for comparisons of this bike to my Carbon Trance and my mid versus high price trail bike project. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below, and I will link my riding video of this bike in the description below, and I show some riding footage with my GoPro and talk through some of the features of the bike. So just a little bit more detail supplementing this review. Thanks for watching.